So I think one of the questions I get the most on the channel concerns prepping for sessions and how do you know how much time to spend? How do you know what ancillary materials you want to use? And this is concerning playing standard rule sets solo. So for this video, I'm going to demonstrate with D&D how to set up a session and start a session with I would consider to be a low amount of prep. And for that, I'm going to actually use a pre-made character that I found. I think this comes from the one of the box sets, the D&D Essentials box set. I'm not completely sure. I think it comes from the one that has this map in it, and I will try to figure out which one this is in case you care. We may be seeing this map just in the background. This is a rogue one, a level 1 rogue. It's a Lightfoot halfling. It has a criminal background, a neutral alignment. I'm going to sort of not use some of this background stuff. We're going to develop the character ourselves a little bit, but basically I'm just using it for all of these stats. So I'm dispensing with the kind of stat part of character creation in favor of some narrative character creation and some type of character creation that I like to use to enhance solo play. And for that, I'm going to supplement a little bit with some things in Solo Geek Deluxe, as well as perhaps a table or two from the GM guide. I also found when I pulled out my D&D books, which I hadn't seen in a while, I found this little moonlight character that one of my kids drew. So maybe this is going to be, maybe we're going to be Moonlight, the rogue halfling, with this little character drawing. Additionally, I want to use, in a recent video I presented these Hexploration tiles and cards, and I'm really want to figure out how to use some of these card decks. So I'm going to somehow do some type of structure, sequence of play, making use of these card decks, and I've pulled in the settlement ones, the wilderness ones, the weird area ones, and the underground ones. I don't know how I'm going to use them yet, or procedurally or anything, but that's what you see here as a gaming supplement. And that's kind of the end, really, of the planning phase in terms of what other material I'm going to use. I may bring in this D20 die here. I may also use this other little one that is also from Tower House Creative, this D4 die that comes with some rules explanation. I'm not so sure about that one yet. I'm trying to keep it minimal. So part one of the prep here is the decision to use pre-made character and the decision to limit my supporting material to what I can get from the player's handbook, the DM guide of the rules I'm using. In this case, it's going to be D&D, and Solo Geek Deluxe, and these cards. And I'm going to just try to stick to that. And that's the end of my prep per se. The next thing I'm going to do is start to think about the character that I already have. So I saved a ton of time in creating the character with the stats. And if you watch my channel or read any of my books, you know that in a sense, to me, the stats themselves, the number themselves, are almost the least important thing about the character. And I'm going to focus a little bit in the character creation, in starting my story, in narratively building my character, and I'll show you how I do that. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our character Moonlight, and we're going to turn our character Moonlight into something with a little bit more personality. And a really shorthand way of doing that is by giving an epithet to the character. So we're going to roll on that table in here. It's a D88 table, and we're going to read green and rainbow, and we got 8 and 5. Moonlight the Detached. Moonlight the Detached. So that's going to be like the nickname basically of Moonlight. Moonlight the Detached, we know, has a criminal background, is a rogue and a Lightfoot halfling. So there's something about Moonlight that keeps her detached, that keeps her outside of the world. And is that going to come into play mechanically? Maybe, maybe not. But it will and can serve as some direction a when we need a sense of where Moonlight might go or how Moonlight might respond. We know that they're known as Moonlight the Detached. So that's going to be a beginning of anchoring this character in a world, because the world itself has bestowed this name upon her. The way she's interacted with the world has resulted in this kind of moniker or nickname that she has, Moonlight the Detached. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to give, well, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to give Moonlight a trinket, because again, I feel like something that's in her pocket that she has, this is going to be a D66 table, and it's going to be something that she is carrying that, again, we can choose to bestow a narrative interest on. And we'll roll and we'll read gold and red, and we got a 6 and a 1. So in Moonlight the Detached pocket, she has a moonlit quill. It writes only at night. That is almost it's almost too close to her name. Writes only at night. It's almost helpful to have something that doesn't seem to kind of go so well, because it gives you the opportunity to develop a story about, well, why would Moonlight have it? We know why Moonlight the Detached would have a moonlit quill, because maybe she's a nighttime character, and maybe she's detached because she kind of travels around at night doing her thievery or whatever. Her alignment here is neutral, so that doesn't really give us much. All right. Now, from the DM guide, I've tagged two things that I want to work with here. One of them, let's start back here. First, I'm going to give my character a book, because I love books and my character would be carrying a book. So this is a D100 table. And again, what we're doing right now before we get going, as we're getting into our story, is just trying to give some more detail to our character. And what detail is she's carrying? Oh, well, her book is actually a letter. That's cool. So in this particular case, now she has a letter and she has a quill. Did she write that letter with that quill? Is she carrying that letter somewhere? Perhaps the letter is going to be involved with something that she's doing. I'm going to very quickly go to placing her in a settlement and developing some type of environment for her. But right now, we know that she's got a letter. She has a moonlit quill that writes only at night, and she is somewhat detached from the society. She has something magical, and I don't yet know what it is, but I really love this section of the DM guide, because it gives you a couple of D20 tables to roll on that concern sort of magical things or objects, and the properties that they have, the quirks that they have, and details from its history. Now, I think this has to do with, well, it could be any item, or maybe it's a wand in particular. I'm just going to roll on some of these tables, because I want to anchor her somewhere to the past. And let us first go to this history table. This is actually a D8 table. I misspoke. So the history of whatever this thing is bane. This item was created by the foes of a particular culture or kind of creature. If the culture or creatures are still around, they might recognize the item and single out the bearer as an enemy. Well, maybe she's detached because she is the bearer of this thing. She's the carrier of this thing. Is this thing the letter? I don't really know yet. But there's something about something she has that is from the enemy culture. Let's see who created this thing and what its intended use was. Here's the D20. Ooh, I got a 20. The undead. The item incorporates imagery of death, such as bones and skulls, and it might be crafted from parts of corpses. It feels cold to the touch. So perhaps the foes of this culture are the undead, and somehow she has this item. I don't know. Let's see maybe what this item does, what minor property it has. Waterborne. The item floats on water and other liquids. Its bearer has advantage on strength athletics checks to swim. Okay. And let's see, it has a D12 quirk. Don't yet know what it is. It's covetous. The item's bearer becomes obsessed with material wealth. So Moonlight the Detached is motivated by wealth, treasure. Maybe that is going to explain why she's going to do what she does. Maybe she's hired by somebody and she is carrying this thing. Now we could see what we want this thing to be, I suppose. I'm not sure. Let's see. We have magic items. Not sure I'm loving any of these particular tables for what this is. Well, actually, I was just thinking about it, and in fact, it makes sense that the thing is this Moonlight quill, because it makes sense that she would have this Moonlight quill that writes only at night if it was something taken from, say, the undead, and it has magical properties that only come out at night. Now, the question is, what is this letter? Was the letter written with this quill, and is the letter perhaps a falsified document that Moonlight is going to use to allow her to go from place to place and do things and collect some money, which we know she's motivated by? She is a thief after all. I don't know that, but it is this Moonlight quill. It's not another thing. It's the Moonlight quill that is the thing that was taken from the undead and has that magical property. So to sum up this section of the video, when you're working with D&D or really any rule set that is not a solo rule set and trying to do solo play, you can increase your chances of success by doing 3 things with your character that will anchor them into a story that you're going to provide. And the first thing, the easiest thing perhaps, is with the character name, give them some type of nickname, some type of epithet is what I call it in my book, or just a casual name that will provide some type of identity and personality and suggest that they have had some kind of life and interaction in the world before your story has started. The second thing you can do is give them something or things that will suggest uniqueness to them. Something that is like a trinket or something that they would be carrying and have with them, again, that would suggest that they have had a life before this story starts, and that will suggest a personality quirk or some identifying characteristic for them as an individual. And then finally, give some type of backstory, history, hook. I find it easiest to have that be in conjunction with the item that they're carrying, but it doesn't have to be. But I think that that is an easy way into it and makes you feel like a lot less pressure. You don't have to come up with an entire decades-long history or story about them. You can come up with a very quick story or piece of information that you know about one of the little trinkets that they have, and then begin to tie that into maybe even the nickname or name they have, to give anchors, narrative anchors is how I think of them, to your character to make them feel like they have a life outside of your session. All right, so those of you who follow my work on the channel may be saying to yourself, but doesn't she always start with environments? Isn't she a proponent of not starting with character creation, but rather starting with an environment? And that is true. I think if you're starting from a totally blank slate, it is better, stronger, easier to start with an environment than a character. And I've talked about this in numerous videos and all my books. I'm not going to really go back over here now why that's the case, especially since I didn't start with an environment here. I mean, in a sense, I did, in that I started with this pre-generated character. You could consider that the character was my environment. So I didn't sit down and do character creation, which I think is a real trap when people try to do that with solo RPG. But the fact is, basically, we were starting with a character. I was developing my character and trying to show you ways to do that for solo. And I was making some notes. I found these really cute little cards. I was downtown in a part of the city I haven't been in a while, and I found these really cute little cards that happen to fit in sleeves if you cut them. So, like, I don't know. I have to find a use for these somehow. I don't usually have things like this, but anyway. However, we do need an environment, and that's what we're going to do next. And with the environment for solo, to just help yourself get into a solo session, I think is very important, a concept that I talked about in Solo Geek Deluxe, really for the first time, kind of formulating it in words. And I'm going to go over it a little bit here, and we're going to use that as the basis for the creation of our environment. And that is the concept of triangulation. And I'm going to read you a little bit about it, that I say that when you have triangulation, that is to say, three things, interrelationships among three different things, you get exposed hidden agendas and emotional undercurrents. Because the third thing, whatever that third thing is, and that third thing may change. Here's a triangle to illustrate this in a sense. This is obviously a pyramid, but when you have three things, you have an interrelationship that is very different than people think of conflict as two things in opposition. And yes, in a sense, of course, that produces conflict. But three things produces tension and more relationship, and allows a dynamic changing of alliances. And it is out of those things that I say in here, stories are born. Out of that destabilization that the third thing brings, you get story. So the concept of triangulation is something we're going to use here as we move to our environment. And as I said at the outset of the video, I want to use these exploration decks that I have because I think they're so cool. I haven't used them yet. And what I've got out here are just, I chose 4 of the 5 that come in the set. The one that I did not pull out here has to do with on the sea. So I've got the Underrealms, a wilderness deck. This is a Stranger Places deck, and a settled lands deck. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, well, there's lots of different ways to do this. I could simply do a D4 and randomize where I'm going to start, or a D4 to see which ones I'm going to use. But I kind of want to go with a settlement. This is what I'm going to do. I want to give myself a settlement. So we're just going to look at something in the settlement deck, and then I'm going to do the D3 roll here to choose the next one that we'll take a look at. So obviously 1, 2, 3. So this is I think this is the Underrealms. So we have an Underrealms and our settlement. These are the two that we're going to be looking at here. What is the third part of this triangle? Well, we are. So in this particular case, when I say triangulation, it is going to be us, our character that we just talked about, Moonlight, and 2 areas, 2 concepts, we'll see what they are, in her environment. That is going to be the 3 points of the triangle that we're talking about to help us get into our adventure and our story. And we're going to put these 2 decks aside. We won't use them for now. And the only way, really, I think the only thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start here with a settlement, is, as I mentioned in the video on these decks, come with pictures. They come with things on the back that relate to each picture. And then they come with a really hefty a chunky group. I think this is 15 cards of just other random tables and some light rules and things, way to sort of give a background to a historical site, or maybe you want something to be haunted. These are also double-sided. Maybe you have a guild base, just really cool stuff. And I'm not sure we're going to use that, but right now I think what I'm just going to simply do is I was going to look through and, well, here you can see the art there. The art on these is really, really nice. Could just choose something. I'm going to just do it randomly because I think that's good for being sort of on the fly thought process for video, but that's pretty. Like, who wouldn't want to live there? So this is, again, settlements. And the way the settled lands are described here is as such. You could just pause if you want to read the back of, this is kind of the instruction booklet, as it were, that comes with this. So we're not going to, we're just going to do something randomly. And random. And shuffling on camera for me is just a terrible, terrible idea. So there we go. That's what we got. Ooh, it's pretty. And it actually looks kind of like it's at night, moonlight. This is a frontier fortress, and we can use the we can use D6s here if we want to see, might as well. So it is seen as a source of pride. Now this is where we're from. And who is in charge is the ruler's stupid heir. So right away, this tells me, what this brings to my mind is that we know we are Moonlight the Detached. And remember, we have this magic thing that came from an opposing faction or enemy. The stupid heir is in charge. Why are we detached? Well, obviously, that stupid heir is like our cousin or something who inherited this beautiful fortress that is understandably a source of pride. And maybe this is a world that is, excuse me about that, maybe this is a world that is always at night. Maybe that's why we are called Moonlight. I mean, this is a nighttime kind of thing. It looks like the moon is shining. Maybe this is a moon world. It's like always at night. Anyway, we live in a settlement in an area, and we are part of the royal family, but our stupid cousin inherited it. And we could find out when it was built. It was built when the region was civilized, before monsters or cults or outlaws infested the fortress. So maybe our stupid heir let in the enemy, and maybe the enemy was the undead, and because we're clever, we stole something from the enemy, and that's how we have our thing. And perhaps I don't know, maybe we're going to use that thing to try to reclaim, even though our cousin is dumb, maybe we're going to try to help him or her out by solving this problem. Currently, the biggest threat, monster attacks are getting frequent and fierce. So this is where we are from, and we could, again, go through some of these cards and build some of that out. I'm not sure I'm going to do that here for this demo, but we're going to move now to the third part of our triangulation for the basis of this adventure, which is the randomly chosen Underrealms deck. And I'll do the same thing here, pull out the supporting cards, and first I'll show you some of the art here on the deck. And again, we're just going to go randomly. I'll try to spare you this painful shuffling and do this fast. Here we go. This is what we chose. I'm not sure that looks so great. Divine Descent. This is a city, actually. It's a city underground, and its founders came from a prison mutiny. Most common lights. I'm not sure what that means. They're enchanted crystals. So maybe there are some enchanted crystals down here. How are the stalactites organized? The wealthy live lower with exclusive space and a better view of the cave. How did they domesticate the bats? Ruthless druids subjugating them with cruelty. Well, I guess this is an underground city, divine descent. And we know that from our story, from our character, that the enemy is the undead. So obviously, to me anyway, this is where the undead live. And they must have sort of come up and tried to, so here we go. They must have come up and tried to, or maybe were successful in overtaking our frontier fortress because of our dumb cousin who is in charge of it. And in the process, in that struggle, this happened prior to our story, we were able to steal that quill. What was it called exactly? The Moonlit Quill. So we were able to steal that. Now remember, that was created from the bones of these people. So I think probably what happened was when the undead invaded, they brought with them things, and we were clever. We stole it. Remember, we're motivated by greed. Maybe we thought we could sell it somehow. We now have this item that has these properties, and the undead have taken over this fortress. I don't know where our cousin is, but we know, given that we have our motivation of attaining wealth, that we're going to try to get some more, basically. And I think even though we are detached, we are Moonlight the detached, I think that, of course, when somebody is so purposefully detached from something, obviously the the twist is that they are still connected to it, right? If they're defined by their detachment, they're still connected to it. So we do have a connection to our family, to our fortress, to our inheritance that maybe is rightfully ours. And I think perhaps we have some motivation to go into this underground city and either gain more wealth, try to steal something else that's going to help us reclaim our rightful palace. I guess this is a fortress. Well, looks like a palace to me, or something. So that is our motivation. That is our story so far. So just to sum up and to keep to the time that I said it would be, I realized, yes, I know, we didn't even actually get to a D&D roll. There was no die rolling. There was no nothing. This is a setup video to try to explain some key and shorthand ways to create a whole story for yourself, to start a session. And you could see now, I think, there are just so many different opportunities to take this character into a session. One of them could be simply to decide that you're going to explore where you are. And you could go to other random tables or supplements to do that. You could just do some die rolling and look around. The other is, of course, to do, go right down into this underground city, a dungeon crawl type of situation. You could perhaps decide you're going to create the NPC of your cousin and have a conversation with your cousin and develop that in some way. There's just a lot of different ways this could go. It could be, it's not tending toward a kind of light and humorous thing because of the whole, you're carrying something made out of bones and the undead, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like a whole sort of zombie skeleton based adventure either, because the main point of that is that you are dealing with an enemy that you have somehow infiltrated or gotten a part of, and maybe have a motivation to try to fend off. You could decide that you could create a random actual goal for yourself that would signal the end or the success of your adventure or the end of this session, or you could still simply keep it open-ended and do some traveling around and discovering and adventuring. And if you happen to be using these particular cards, you could turn to them there's some travel rules here. It really obviously depends on how you wish to take the story and where you're most comfortable developing it. But the point is, you have a story. You have a feeling of things to do that would make sense based on who your character is. And you've gotten there pretty quickly without hours and hours of prep.